Hello and welcome back to Just Add Movement. We're at episode 10 and today we get to jam out with the wonderful Stephanie Johnson. Stephanie is a childhood development specialist, developmental movement therapist, trainer, and author. With over 35 years of experience as an educator, as well as being a somatic psychotherapist and dance therapist for 20 years, Stephanie is internationally recognized for her work helping both organizations and families understand how the nervous system is organized through movement, from infancy all the way through adulthood. Stephanie's the creator of Baby Bear and the author of the award-winning book, Baby Bear, a bottom-up approach to growing strong brains and bodies. Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you, Erin.
I'm so glad to have you here. And if my memory serves me correct, you are the first dance movement therapist I am interviewing.
Well, would you look at that?
So that's something we have in common, and I'm so excited to dive into your very specific expertise. I think in general, people don't know a lot about people who work with bodies and movement. There's so many different ways to play, and you, because I've known you for so long, got to witness you take a very specific track with developmental movement. So let's dive into our first question, Stephanie. What do you know to be true about the body based on your body of work?
Okay. Well, I know many things to be true about the body, so we're just gonna pick one for this moment in time. What I know to be true about the body is that it likes to grow from the bottom up. And so sometimes I use this image or metaphor of a really robust, big, strong oak tree that takes up, almost your whole yard or this huge space in a park. And if we had X-ray vision, we could see under the earth and see that the root system is as deep and as wide as the branches we see on top. And so when I think about bodies and brains and development, I think that root system as the bottom, when I talk about bottom up approaches, and the branches that we see that can have habitat for animals, you can swing from them, they offer shade and beauty, all the gifts that we have to bring, I think of as being sort of the brain and our cognition and our expression. And I think of that root system as being the deeper kind of invisible mechanics of being and interacting in the world. And so what I know to be true about bodies is that they are happiest when we invest in a deep and wide root system, which in the way I see it as a deep and wide physical experience, and low brain development. So sometimes I think of bottom up as the body feeding the brain, and sometimes I think of it as low parts of the brain feeding the top parts of the brain. So lots of ways to think about bottom up, but that's what I know to be true about bodies.
Well, this is beautiful, and it's so clear that right out the gate with this beautiful imagery, you know how to teach concepts and make it accessible to all ages. So what came up for me as you described that is, oh, please give us an example of what your work would look like, even though, most of us listening are adults. Take us back to some of your work with children so that we can really feel this work that you're doing with children in particular.
Right. Okay, so when we're thinking about the root system and how the root system of a tree is absorbing the nutrients and how they are the objective of the root system is to feed the upper part. The upper part of the branches, the big fancy gifts of the branches, when children come for an assessment, it's usually because someone is recognizing something that they can't quite put their finger on. And well-meaning adults will have some ideas. They like to throw out the word sensory stuff, or, they're seeing some discomfort or less ease and joy in a child's body, and maybe some behaviors, or maybe some academic concerns. And so when the children come, I am playing a little bit of detective work to see if where the unfinished business in growing that root system is. And a really good tool for that is assessing primitive reflexes. So I have a little battery of clinical assessments that I buzz through that looks like play, of course, to them, but I'm looking to see what unfinished boxes are there to be checked so that their root system can actually feed their cortex, and we can get the results they can have ease and joy in their pursuits, versus a root system that does not have its boxes checked. So it's kind of like holding and has some retention around feeding that cortex. So it looks first like me assessing for the integration of primitive reflexes. And that is one of the silos under the big umbrella of developmental movement, the way I see it. I think everyone has a different definition of developmental movement therapy. And so the way I treat it, as I do include primitive reflexes, and of course the six developmental movement patterns, and attachment work and birth history. So when I first meet a child, I am looking through the lens of where can we where can we feed and nurture this root system so that they can bring their gifts to the world with more joy and ease.
I love that. And I saw that you talk about it as a root cause lens. So that works perfectly with this image of the tree that you're talking about. Now, a lot of folks who listen to this are parents and will think of their children. And yet, you can bring this work to anyone, 0 to 100, because we all have a body and we've all had this developmental path that we've gone on. So would you be willing to kind of tweak that? I imagine much is the same, but if I were to come to you as an adult wanting to find that root cause, does it work the same way?
In theory, it works the same way, and application is quite a bit different, because the children have a lot less need to process and verbalize their narrative. They are not attached to a narrative. They don't even really know what that means. So the work really is simply the work. We're just feeding the nervous system and we're organizing. The older a child gets, I might integrate some top-down approaches. If they've got awareness of a pain point, I might say, you know how you said this was hard for you? Well, this exercise will help that. That's as complex as it really gets with children in terms of the reflection and the process piece. When adults come, we can do a really small piece of movement and nervous system work, and we can sit and unravel that, through narrative discussions or through other modalities, but we move much slower.
Mm.
It's not this movement, now this movement. Let's try this, kiddo. Okay, now we're going to do this. The pacing is so much slower.
Mm.
Um, but and adult bodies are different in that, they come with 50 sometimes years of experience, so their comfort level with popping down on the floor with me is different. So the application looks different, but theoretically, we are still playing detective work. What unfinished business are we looking at? And then the older the body is, we're not just looking at the unfinished business in its raw form like we are with young children. We're now also looking at years and years of very brilliant compensatory measures, which can add to the layers of stress and rubble that sort of needs to be looked at, so that we can actually get to those early foundational pieces. The compensation that happens when a nervous system is disorganized is pretty impressive. And so sometimes we're not just looking at the true symptoms of retained reflexes or unfinished or underdeveloped developmental movement patterning. We're also looking at what has the body done to make up for that. So it becomes a little bit more complex with adults.
Well, I love what you're bringing up in me as I listen to you because, of course, this podcast is focused on this idea of threshold moments. And as I'm listening to you, I'm overlaying that with unfinished business and all these threshold moments that we live throughout all these developmental stages that may to some extent be unfinished in our bodies or somehow held in our bodies. And I don't think I have a question as much as just I'm chewing on that. Is there anything you would say in response to that sort of just general, look what I'm thinking about, Stephanie? How would you frame that for me?
Yeah, I don't know if this supports where you're at, but something popped in. I just wanted to give an example of when we're talking about the unfinished business and how adults will be very unaware of unfinished business, unaware. So sometimes when moving adult bodies through developmental movement patterns, they will have pretty intense emotional responses that surprise them. Um, and what we end up kind of flushing out and investigating is that it is your birthright to move through certain things from conception to walking. And oh, wow, I'm getting emotional about that. Um, when bodies do not move through for whatever reason, there's like uh, some kind of held emotion that happens because you have to get upright and you have to walk and we have to learn how to ride our bikes and run, but that unfinished business stays in there. And so if you find yourself at 40 years old, you know, homolaterally crawling on your belly for the first time, or even going through the static motions of that for the first time, there can be this huge emotional release that you cannot put your finger on. And so that's sort of what I mean by it's much slower. We're not just buzzing across the floor in here. We might just barely start to, very slowly move our bodies in a homolateral way, if that's what we're working on. Um, and the noticing and the outpouring of sometimes it's hysterical laughing, sometimes it's uncontrollable sobbing, and sometimes it's just like frozen stuck. I mean, it shows up in a lot of ways, but I think this point to what you were sharing about like unfinished business, like what more about that? Sometimes unfinished business shows up in a very unexpected and emotional way in adult bodies. Like I said, because it is your birthright at living in this human upright body to have gone through the stages that get us here. And when one of them is glossed over or not completed for a myriad of reasons, that kind of stays in there. Um, you know what they say, the body keeps the score. That's what they say.
Lots of people love to say that. And and for good reason. And I mean, you beautifully called in this idea of birthright and our bodies having this birthright to move through these patterns. And so again, my mind, I'm definitely head tripping, but in a really like fun way around, wow, I'm expanding how I'm conceptualizing threshold moments. And so even though I'm going to turn this on you in a second and ask about your threshold moment, I'm kind of generally thinking about this 40-year-old or 50-year-old who might come to you and their threshold moment that they might not cognitively be able to understand is that they get to reclaim their homolateral crawl so that there's like more capacity or space or like whatever it is, and it's all nonverbal. So how to know you need it, but you really are doing primal threshold work. You're doing birthright work. Like, I just have this overwhelming, like, adoration of you and the work you're doing in this moment, of how important it is to go back that deeply into the body. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So from that place, who knows how you'll answer this? It may feel abrupt. And in my mind, it doesn't feel abrupt because of whatever is synthesizing in here through your energy and words and work. But there's this question I ask everyone next about the threshold moment that you're living through, that you're leaning into personally, professionally. And I'm just so curious how you're going to answer. So I'll just put the question out and we'll go from there.
Well, once again, there are many thresholds at any given time, so I'm just going to pick one. A threshold that I'm leaning into after, a whole life of waving the body has all the answers flag is I am leaning into this threshold that we have this body that we can see and feel and hear and touch. And we also have our energetic body, which most of us don't see and hear and feel in the same way as we do our physical body. And to get the most bang out of our lived experience, it behooves us for the two of them to be in collaboration. And so this sort of new threshold I'm walking through is, what if it's not just all about the physical body, like I've been saying for my whole entire career? What if it's not even a what if, but okay, now what are you doing in your practice to invite people to partner with their energetic bodies, so that the interventions and things we're moving through yield even more. So for children, I've been having a really great time telling them we've got this body that we can feel. And then, I touch them and tickle them and giggle. You can feel. And then we also have an energy body, which most of us can't see. We can kind of feel it though. And then I do a very simple exercise with the pendulum, and they can see when their energy doors are open or closed. We want them all to be open. I say energy doors. Sometimes when I know it's okay with families, I will say chakras, but the energy doors need to be open so we can partner with our energy body. And when they're closed, we open, and they can see my little pendulum move when we open those doors. So it's really a baby step into what other people might call energy work, but I'm really using it as we have this body, we have this body. How can we help them work as a team? So that's sort of my threshold, is that, oh goodness, Stephanie, there's more than this tissue and this flesh and this meat suit we're walking around in. So there's my threshold.
Well, two things. First, I really appreciate how in both answers to questions you're prefacing it with, there are many, and I'm picking one. Um, and so this one threshold that you've picked, I really want to acknowledge to be an expert in your field and to lean into what if there's more, and there is more, and how does my work get to expand and change? I imagine that requires something from inside of you and your energy to be open. Like, how are you navigating that instead of being very rigid and saying, no, it's the meat suit, man. Like, that's all there is. You're not clinging to that. You're choosing instead to expand and play and invite your children into that question that you're living. So how are you making it okay?
Well, Erin, um, I don't know any other way to do it. Like, when I get an impulse, I don't have I've never really had a too big of a self-editor. And for better for worse, I just don't seem to come with that self-editing mechanism. So, um, I definitely am surrounded by people who are masters in understanding energy and seeing energy and spending quite a bit more time listening to them. So I think that has been a huge influence. Um, but also, 30 years is a long time to be doing using the same interventions and um, I just don't know how a person wouldn't, like for me, it's very easy to remain open and what else is there? If even only out of boredom, like how many different ways can a person come and present and me prescribe the same, oh, I know what to do here before it just gets a little, like it needs to be livened up with something. So a few years back, I could sense, so we need to liven things up, Stephanie. And I thought, like I'm really kind of curious about art therapy. I'm really curious about like traditional sort of play therapy. Just sort of had my feelers out and what else can I bring in part because my body isn't going to want to roll around on the floor with children forever. And in part just recognizing that there can be other things. We can keep doing developmental movement work, and there are other things. So yeah, maybe a little bit of boredom and maybe a little bit of I've always just had a really good relationship with whatever that little hunch, that little intuition is. Maybe it's my energy body.
That's just so beautiful because here's the thing, Stephanie, like the reason for this conversation and having these kinds of conversations is to expand our collective energy body, um, wondering how do we move through these moments because not everyone listens to that, and some people choose to not evolve or change. And so I just really appreciate, in this moment, especially, I can relate to being rigid or not wanting to change. So I really appreciate you so effortlessly naming, like, yeah, you just get to stay open and wonder about these other things and trust that there's there's many different ways to achieve whatever goal one is trying to reach. And you've had one particular way of working, but it's really exciting. I think so many people have threshold moments around career. Do I want to keep doing it the same way for another bunch of years?
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think that what you're perceiving as effortless is only comes after, you know, so many hours with bodies and learning. Like, I wouldn't have been this open to the energy aspect of things or a spiritual aspect of things when I was 30 or 35 or 40. I feel like that freedom is just like, okay, I know that. I already know that. Now what else can I know? But I had to sort of know that and practice it and put the everything's about the meat suit flag up, to reach some sort of level of, I don't want to say expertise, but just comfort with that whole body of operations. So I want to, I think there's something about how long you're doing a thing. Um,
yeah, so important.
just that just frees you up.
Yes. To be able to really feel expertise, that then there can be a trust in that and then an expansion and curiosity for what else,
Yeah.
because you have that confidence. And I experience that with you all the time when I listen about your work. And you're such a great example of someone who's really done your work your whole life in this way, and you know it. So I really hope the right people continue to find you as you're expanding this. Um, I am going to transition us into the third segment of our conversation that becomes less conversational, and it becomes about what does your body know right now? And so from episode 1, when I had some tech difficulties with the music, I chose to leave it silent. And for the next couple of minutes, I want to invite us to mutually explore the present moment through movement or however we're comfortable. And for those listening, you can put on music if you like. Stephanie, you could put on music if you like. But whatever you need auditorily, go ahead and take care of that. And then we're going to just spend 2-3 minutes dropping in to see what else is there, to your point, and what else is there. So it's very open. You're a trained dance movement therapist, so you understand completely the invitation, and have done it many times. But I'm curious what might emerge for you by doing it in this moment. So I'd love to invite you to move with me.
Okay.
So you can tune me out, Stephanie. I'm just going to set this up for other people. We're going to take a collective breath. We haven't done that yet in this episode. And however breathing feels good to you, you can put hands on your body to feel your breath, or you can stretch your body to feel your breath. There's a lot of different ways to add movement to your breath and to the moment. So just reminding people, just add movement is what happens when we drop into an unplanned, unchoreographed moment of movement. I'm going to go silent for just another minute. I may pop in and say something that comes through. But let's all collectively move our energy through moving our body in some big or small way. Take another minute to see what else might want to be expressed, received, heard. And then slowly, slowly, without rushing, find your way to pause for now, or those of you listening, you can keep moving. But Stephanie and I are going to transition eventually back into conversation. And we'll get to notice what we notice from taking a moment after this beautiful conversation to see, what does your body know in this moment?
You're asking me that.
Yes.
Um, my body knows about things that grow. My head was drawn to a plant that I have in the corner of my office that is in full regalia because it's summer. It's getting a lot of light. So we're tending to it every day. So something about constant growth and a constant being in a constant state of creation. With the solstice being yesterday, I was drawn towards the windows, the light coming in, my plants. I like to move with my eyes closed. And that's what I noticed is like go to the light.
Mm, what a beautiful way to transition to the end. Go to the light. Um, I want to thank you for that opportunity to move after listening to you say so many things that moved me. I found myself exploring children, like just that image of being a child and remembering children I've worked with. And I want to thank you for bringing us into this space to consider the children in our lives, to consider the children that we once were, and then so beautifully to invite us to constantly keep growing and expanding and going to the light. That's so poetic and beautiful. Um, Stephanie, is there anything else you would like to say from this moment as we finish up for today?
There is, if I may, when we were talking about the transition and the threshold moment, and I was talking about, oh, after I can only find this ease after years. I guess if there are any, younger professionals that are listening to this, and I find this in my students that I teach, that my teaching colleagues and I, you can always be like, oh, it's just so simple. Like when we have our talks, we're just like, oh, it's so simple. And I constantly have to be reminding us that when you are first learning a craft and there is a lot more nuts and bolts and like, learning of the flesh and this sense of ease that we're talking about is not I don't know. I don't know if it's a thing you need to have when you're starting. I mean, certainly we don't want to grunt and grind through our learning, but um, I think I want to give younger professionals just an opportunity, just a shout out, like you're just doing it. You just do it. You just do it and keep learning and do it and keep learning. And the ease that we're talking about as 50-plus-year-old women, that will come. And it's that I don't know if ease is the goal right away, I guess.
Well,
It
and
makes
honestly,
it sound like I'm thinking like that everything is, oh, you gotta put in your work. That's not what I mean. I just mean like, oh, it's just so easy. We've cracked the code. It's just so easy. I mean, I know that that's not what it feels like the first 15, 20 years that you're working in a field. So
correct.
I just want to say that also don't grip on to it needs to be easy, maybe.
Well, I appreciate that you're acknowledging those who are newer in a field. And I heard that in my own heart for the things that are new for me that I'm just starting now. That when we begin something, beginning is hard and it isn't easy. It isn't easeful. So I really value that message a lot. Thank you, Stephanie. Is there anything else you'd like to say to feel complete for our time together? This has just been wonderful.
No, I agree. It's been wonderful. I thank you so much for inviting me, Erin.
You're so welcome. Thank you, everyone who's listened. We appreciate you jamming out with us. Until next time.